Hi everyone, my name is Charlie, and today I want to talk about suffering. This should be my last video in this series of videos regarding Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic. As I've said before, this was the second time I read this book, and as I have already reviewed it once, I did not feel comfortable reviewing it in a similar fashion. I also wanted to discuss the book in its finer details and talk about what I got from the book. This final video is about suffering because this is one of the latter points in Gilbert's book and is one that I feel needs to be discussed and goes hand in hand with fear. And it's this idea that writers need to suffer in order to make good art. Once again, Gilbert and I agree on that you don't need to suffer in order to make good art. There are so many times in history that we are told about the alcoholic writer, the drug-addicted writer, the depressed writer. All of these things have been almost romanticised by critics and by readers throughout history to say why this writer was good. She discusses Raymond Carver's alcoholism and how he wasn't able to write unless he was free from the alcohol, and yet once again people have romanticised this idea that he was best able to write because of his addiction. This was something that I have encountered before with other people saying that they needed to use marijuana or other forms of drugs in order to create good work. I feel like this was a big teenage thing of people throughout university thinking that it was a good idea because Jack Kerouac had written something and they wanted to be the next Jack Kerouac. And let's not even get into that discussion. Let's just talk about why is it people believe that in order to create something good and create something filled with passion that they need to suffer, that they need to feel pain. I'll admit that I am a writer who, for years, I had been writing lyrics. From about the age of 17 until 23, I was writing lyrics. There was a time when I was writing them all the time, sometimes I'd write 3 at a time, and I really wanted to understand the form. I ended up beginning this series of lyrics related to an experience that I had had in my life. Over the next 4 years, I ended up writing a series of lyrics that all talked about the same event that had happened in my life, and it was more of like a form of therapy. It was more of like a way of me beginning to understand what had happened and being able to let it go. I remember it very well because it was around the November-December time of 2015. I was just sat downstairs, not doing much. I think I was watching American Dad on the television, and this idea for a lyric entered my head. That night, I ended up writing these lyrics entitled In the Dark, and when I finished writing them, it was almost as though this weight had been lifted. It was me finally understanding and coming to terms with this event that had happened and almost getting over it. We're 2 years later, and whilst I've tried to dabble in lyrics since then, I have not written anything that has dealt with the same emotions, and nothing has felt as cathartic or as good as these lyrics have felt. And it hasn't led to me stopping writing lyrics, it's just meant that I feel like I've got no topic to talk about now, but it's also come to the point that I don't actually want to go out and suffer in order to be able to create good art. I personally just don't like this idea that you've got to be in some sort of torment in order to create good art, because you don't. There are so many people that I know that have come into writing and are writing because they just have the passion and they have the drive, and they lead relatively prosaic, mundane lives. They have created some of the greatest works of fiction and performance art that I have ever known. Whilst there have definitely been times when there have been struggles within there, those struggles have mostly been related to the writing and making sure that everything worked properly, but they have never lost their enjoyment or their love for said projects and their need to create. And there are so many times in life that people are going to want you to suffer, and so many times people are going to hold your not suffering against you, or even your suffering against you, that to do it just in order to create a body of work seems completely mindless and unnecessary to me. You only have to work with your creativity. You probably came up with the inspiration and the idea feeling extremely thrilled and ecstatic and enthusiastic about the idea. Why should your enthusiasm wane just because you have this idea that you have to feel somewhat scared and feel like you've got to be suffering in order to create? I think that Gilbert talks about this. You have to, if you want to suffer, By all means suffer, but you're not going to enjoy yourself if you do that. What you ought to do is just what this book discusses, and just make this contract with you, between you and your creativity, that you are going to work on something and you are going to enjoy it. Find the things that you enjoy in your life and create the book. Create the piece of art. Don't sit there willing it to come, trying to force something out. There are so many things in life that you could do creatively, and then you will come back to something and really end up enjoying it more. You don't need to suffer in order to create something good. And once again, that was why I took a break 2 years ago, and I ended up coming out of it and writing a novel, and I have been working on stuff that I have consistently enjoyed since then. And yes, I have taken different breaks here and there, but those breaks have been filled with reading or going out and doing events or just writing poetry. And whilst my poetry might not go anywhere and people might never see it, I enjoyed it, and it's there for me to read in future and for me to enjoy and get something out of. I think suffering comes from people thinking everything that they create has to be good and has to be enjoyed by people out there, and that they are only writing for other people. And as I discovered in November 2016, we can only write for ourselves, and we should only be writing for ourselves. And creating is usually our way of making sense of the world, is our way of just sharing something. But first we've got to share with ourselves. We've got to figure out what we want to write, what we want to create ourselves, and forcing ourselves to do it is never going to feel good, and ultimately it's going to lead to us burning out or having experiences that I had 2 years ago, where I was extremely sad, unable to even pick up a pen without being filled with this extreme feeling of dread. That was all down to me. It was something that I enjoyed, and I was no longer allowing myself to enjoy it. I think that definitely people need to go into any creative project with enthusiasm, and if you aren't, then you should really begin questioning whether it is the correct project for you. Anyway, this is something that I really am interested in discussing, and do you believe that you need to suffer in order to create? If you do, this probably wasn't the video for you, but do discuss things with me in the comments. I understand that Big Magic and the ideas behind Big Magic aren't the ideas for everyone, but they did help me. And if you want a better idea of what Gilbert is talking about, I will leave a link to her TED Talk down below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, that is all.